Imagine being forced to spend your childhood in a social welfare home, placed in the care of authoritarian, maybe abusive adults, told that you and your friends are all suffering from a brain disorder, forced to take powerful drugs, even given electric shock treatment. This is just part of the nightmare that hundreds of young Kiwis faced in state care, as Rod Vaughan reports.
This room, Rod, I was dragged across here when I was 15 from a ward next door, and I was locked in this room.
40 years after being committed to New Zealand's largest mental hospital, Bev Jackson is confronting the most traumatic time of her life.
It was just a bare room. It didn't have a bed in it, and it had faeces all over the walls. It was just rubbed in faeces, and the room absolutely stunk.
Difficult coming in here?
Very difficult. Very, very difficult coming in here.
How are you feeling?
I'm feeling really, really quite sick.
Bev was a teenager, a ward of the state, when she was locked up with some of the country's most dangerously disturbed people in this former ward at Pororoa Hospital.
They would put children locked up with these people in this ward where we were attacked, we were treated absolutely terrible.
And then there was the shock treatment. What effect did that electric shock treatment have on you?
The effect it had was, first of all, it was memory loss. I couldn't remember where I was, I couldn't remember why I was here, and when I woke up from it, my throat and my mouth and everything was absolute, like I'd had something shoved down my throat.
Bev was taken into care in the 1960s. Concerned at the conditions the 10-child family was living in, child welfare split her siblings between various homes. Bev spent time in institutions in Wellington and Christchurch before coming here to Ferrum House in the R.I.P. What an imposing residence it is.
It certainly is, Brod. It's a beautiful old house, historic old house, but it's got some terribly sad memories, and especially sad memories for me.
So, Bev, this is pretty much how it was when you came here?
Yes, it is, Rod. This is really how the house was. And I was very happy to come and live here when I first saw the place.
But the happiness was not to last. Ahead lay a strict regime that prompted the girls to run away on a regular basis. And the punishment for that was solitary confinement, Bev says, sometimes in the attic.
We were dragged up these stairs. Nobody came up here willingly. This was a creepy place. This was the attic, where we were locked in for long periods of time in total isolation.
Ferrum House certainly had its problems with the girls' discipline, with runaways in particular. The home's consulting GP thought medical science might have an answer, and diagnosed virtually all the girls with epilepsy. So began an extraordinary experiment.
The whole school was put on drugs. All the girls were taking these drugs, and they'd all been diagnosed with epilepsy. Now you tell me, how does a school of 13 and 14-year-old girls all develop epilepsy overnight?
How many girls are we talking about?
About 24 to 28 girls at one time.
They were all diagnosed as being epileptic?
As being epileptics, and they were all put on drugs. We had to line up every day to pick up our drugs.
Documents from the Ministry of Social Development back up Bev's memory. To confirm this diagnosis, the girls were taken on day-long visits to Pororoa Psychiatric Hospital. Tests were run, and the doctors decided medication was the answer.
I myself was put on Nidrain, and most of the school was put on Nidrain, but some people had other bits and pieces as well.
Nidrain is a so-called anticonvulsant used in the treatment of epilepsy, but also to treat the mentally subnormal and control their behaviour. Other drugs given to the girls, up to 3 times a day, included Mogadon, Dilantin, phenobarbital and Valium, essentially a cocktail of sedatives and anti-epileptics. The manufacturers of Mogadon warn that it must never be given to children. Dilantin and phenobarbital are now known to increase suicidal behaviour. What effect did these drugs have on you and the other girls?
Well, I don't know what effect they had on the other girls, but for me, they used to make me feel very drowsy and sluggish.
Yeah, easier to control, like easier to get hold of. If we tried to run or something like that, you didn't really quite know what you're up to.
Bev's best friend at Ferrum was Alana Lewis. Did you feel comfortable about taking these tablets?
No, not at all. Not at all. And it did affect me. It sort of, how would I describe it, quietened me down. It made me very submissive.
The doctors insisted the program was a sensible treatment and not an experiment. But even those who supported it, like the then Superintendent of Child Welfare for the Education Department and the Principal of Ferrum House, referred to it as a drug experiment.
You tell me that you can put 24, 25 girls on drugs overnight when they've suddenly all been developed with epilepsy, and it's not an experiment? It is an experiment. It was known as the Ferrum House drug trial.
Well, clearly some of the girls there were a bit of a handful, and you were too by your own admission.
Yes.
So were they justified in administering these drugs to you?
I believe they were certainly... I believe they were justified in a punishment, but not that. Not the punishments we got. We were young, and we trusted people, that we believed these people were going to help us and make our lives, teach us how to live good lives, better lives. It didn't happen.
And as well, Bev and Alana say they were given electric shock treatment on their first visit to Pororua, something that seemed to them to be nothing more than punishment.
I believe now it was punishment, yes I do. But at the time, we didn't know how to think, really.
What effect did the electric shock treatment have on you?
I remember being, I felt very, very sick after it. I may have vomited. I felt very sick, I felt really odd, and like I'd been run over or something by a bus maybe.
By 1969, though, the drug regime was causing concern. An Education Department head office meeting revealed that senior staff were astonished to learn about the sheer volume of drugs being administered at Ferrum. And even more telling, when in 1971 a new principal took over at the home, the program was instantly discontinued. The new head stating in a memo that the drugs were in fact doing the job that the staff should be attempting to do. But that came too late for Bev. By then, a suicide attempt had seen her committed to Pororua Hospital, this time for years. What she didn't know at the time is that some of the drugs the girls were given, particularly the anti-epileptics, made patients twice as likely to feel suicidal.
I have got absolutely dreadful memories of this place. This place took my childhood. This place took my teenage years, and I came here a child, and I left. I left in a terrible state, this place.
The experiences and care over the last 4 decades have blighted the lives of hundreds, if not thousands, of state wards. Claims of historic abuse and care, and attempts to get redress and compensation, can be taken direct to a special investigative unit in the Ministry of Social Development. But Garth Young, who heads the Ministry's Care Claims and Resolution team, doesn't accept that the drug regime at Ferrum House constitutes abuse.
Of course we accept that those girls were prescribed medication at the time, but I'm not sure what more I or anybody can say other than acknowledge that they were the facts, that was the reality. They were given the medication.
And do you accept now that it shouldn't have been done?
Well, I don't see how I can accept that, given that that was a medical decision that was made at the time. Clearly, if we're applying today's medical standards, then I would assume that a different decision would be arrived at.
You recognise yourself there?
I do.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Bev and Alana have kept in touch over the years, and have recently found other Ferrum girls are trying to make contact.
And I think that was the only official photo that Ferrum House ever had done.
Awareness of what they've been exposed to is starting to grow amongst the Ferrum girls, with the official records confirming the drug regime. But for other women who've been wards of the state, there is no such confirmation of what they say they suffered. Diane Hames has only the diary she kept while in care. It reads innocently enough, but that's only because, she says, it was censored by her social welfare minders.
Yes, the staff would read it, and if there was something sensitive, they'd rip out the page and I'd be put on punishment.
Placed in care to escape an alcoholic father and abusive mother, Diane eventually found herself in Weymouth Girls' Home in South Auckland. She says it was like being put into prison, but one where the staff would regularly rape her and other girls.
How often?
I'm going to say between 4 and 6 times a month. I'm not sure.
Over what period of time?
From April to February.
Almost a year. How did they manage to keep it from the rest of the staff?
I didn't tell. I can't explain it, but me thinking now, you know, why didn't I just fight or scream out or whatever, but who was going to help me?
How have these experiences affected you?
Tried to kill myself 4 times. I'm an alcoholic.
Do you think you'll ever get over it?
Diane is clinging to a slender hope, a space at the end of her diary for one last entry that might make a difference. Something from the state.
I want to save the last page for my letter of apology so I can stick it on the back here and close it.
How confident are you that you'll get that?
Very.
But Diane Hames may have to wait for a long time before any apology is forthcoming.
I can't make any comment on what Mrs. Hames is saying one way or the other because we simply haven't investigated her claim as yet.
Why haven't you attached more priority to investigating her claim?
Quite simply because it's one of the more recent claims that has been made, and there's others that we're dealing with it beforehand, and sadly Mrs. Hames' claim isn't atypical.
The Ministry of Social Development is facing many hundreds of claims from former state wards. Some they've heard directly, others are going through the courts. Only a small percentage have been settled, 52 cases, each taking between 11 months and 3 years.
We welcome anybody to approach us directly. I guess there's 2 ways that people can ultimately take a claim. That's either to go through the court process or just to come directly to the ministry, to our team and talk with us. And similarly, if somebody has filed a claim in court, then they're also very, very welcome to come and talk with us about that claim and to see whether there's any possibility of resolving that directly with them without having to go through the court process.
Taking a case to court means the longest delays. But for claimants like Bev Jackson, court remains the best option. Because, she says, the MSD investigations are not independent.
I have absolutely no confidence in MSD. How can you have confidence in a department that is investigating their own people?
Well, I'm really sorry to hear that, and I understand that to some extent. But you know, we also have a number of people who we have worked with who have had outcomes for them that have been really, really helpful. So you know, we certainly don't make any promises that we're going to be able to meet everybody's needs or expectations, but we'll certainly do our best to do that.
It's a load of shit, I'm sorry. It's a load of shit. I don't know who they're helping, but it's certainly not the people, it's not the children that they were supposed to be helping. I'm sure if you could find a lot of these girls that you wouldn't very much find any happiness, they're all bad stories that have no good ending.
They're broken people.
Yes. Yep.
And you're one of them.
I am, I'm afraid.